Calling it to order. Roll call, we've got Dan, Megan, McCoy, Debbie, Dr. Rice, Kathy, and Jane all present tonight. Item number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. The only thing that I would add here that I omitted when I sent it out was 5.4. I've got some new information about the Tree City qualification. There's no problems, but just an interesting status update to relate to everybody on where we're at there.
Amended agenda.
We have a first and a second. All in favor? Aye. Item number 4 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. These would be the minutes from the meeting on November 5th, Tuesday of 2019.
Second.
All in favor to approve? Aye. Old business 5.1, the Bowie Playground Build Project updates on events. The next playground meeting will be Wednesday, December 11th. It will start at 5 p.m. at City Hall. The reason that normally those were starting a little bit later, trying to give folks who might work time to attend, but in this case, the vendor that's presenting is from Chattanooga, I believe, and she's going to be, I think, the final vendor out of the groups that have come through, and so we wanted to meet a little bit earlier, kind of at her request, so that she could, when she hit the road, she'd get home at a reasonable hour. The only other, I guess there's a couple of things that next after that. At that meeting, we will pick and select a date for the first design meeting. So there won't be any vendor presentations, but it'll probably be one of the longer meetings we're going to have. And I anticipate the topics that we're going to cover are from the catalog trying to produce a requirements document. So it might talk about whether we're wanting 100% inclusive or not, and it might give recommendations or requests on the types of gear that we want, not necessarily a part and model number, but out of the things we've seen, the rope climbing, the carousels that you can scoot right in there with. So if there's 3 or 4 pieces of equipment that we said we absolutely would like to see, we'll add that, as well as determining a theoretical budget, which I know is going to be difficult because, but we've got to talk a little bit about what's realistic going forward, that we can come up with a number, if it's 500, 600, 700, whatever that amount is, because that document and then that proposed estimate is what I would go back to each of these vendors with to say, hey, we've heard, here's what we're looking for. Each of you, can you bring us back a proposal? And at that point, I think we'll be able to start weeding out who's a closer match to what we're looking for, and then start really looking at numbers and working our way towards getting a playground design that we can wrap up and ultimately get a budget that's finalized on it and submit it to the BOC for consideration. I don't foresee that happening in the next meeting at all. That'll be probably those are going to be a sequence of meetings. The big one after December 11th will be the design meeting, and then after that we'll send the documents out to the vendors, and then we'll schedule a meeting probably 2 or 3 weeks, whatever timetable I hear back from them that they all need to respond. And then we'll see who responds and the quality of the work they do and the time and effort, and that'll be the topic of the following meeting. So we haven't picked a date for that next meeting past December 11th, but we can talk about that in that meeting as part of the orders of business that day. Probably it'll be January, and probably be like maybe the second and a half to third week of January. And the only reason I say that is because of the holidays between now and then I will also be out of town like the 6th through the 9th, or 6th through the 10th. So that week unplugs me. Any other questions or discussion on that topic? I don't have that agenda. It's her specialty is the natural park setting. I don't want to say for sure without having it in front of me. But I will send the agenda out for that later this week. That'll have that information and kind of a breakdown of the order of who's presenting and topics. The next item is 5.2, review and recap, History Village Santa Photos event. It was a rainy day, a very rainy day. We had a donation bucket set out for donations for the playground project, and then $50 is what we collected there. So I haven't gone down to First Bank yet to put that in, but I'll make a deposit on that. I think Dr. Rice has the rosters of the attendees, and he was kind of compiling that. So, and he's also kind of put together an article, a write-up for the newspaper.
It has been submitted.
It's been submitted. We've got a set of photos. Lisa was there and took some photos. I took some photos and sent them in. So we're going to kind of let them pick and choose and see what article they come out with.
Yeah, Lisa said that the newspaper folks said they would use 4 pictures, one Santa with the kids, taking the pictures, one of the schoolhouse, one at the clinic, and one post office.
Very good.
That would be nice.
Yep, excellent. And I sent some photos in with Santa and the kids and Santa there. I don't know if Lisa got some of those as well, but I'm sure they'll pick the best representative of all of them. She had a really nice phone camera, so took better pictures than my camera. What could we didn't have a huge turnout. I would say number 1 driver was the weather, and the number 2 driver was probably just the time of the year. So people traveling, they're going here and they're visiting vacation, family and friends. Either if they're not gone, they've got family in town they're entertaining. So I don't know how to correct any of those types of things other than try to move it to a different weekend, if we wanted to do that exercise again. Okay.
And I would suggest at least 1 week earlier.
A week before Thanksgiving, or?
I mean later. I think in Williamson County, because the schools are out, the schools get out in Williamson County on Friday before Thanksgiving, and I think really then people that are going to be gone are gone because they're out the whole week. I really think that probably, there wasn't a lot, we didn't do a lot of advertising. I think if we start advertising earlier, that people that are here and visiting, they'll bring their kids out too. And you're right, the rain was horrendous. And this is our first year doing it? Yeah.
So those families will come back next year and they'll bring their friends, or they'll have told more people about it.
Those who came had a good time.
Yeah, everybody was really taken with the exhibits, and we're just amazed of all the stuff that's been collected there and all the exhibits.
And Darty told me he served as a tour guide of the automated computerized attendance of all the kids who were there. He said, we must do this next year.
I'm trying to think if there's any other comments or thoughts or questions. They never. The other thing, the printer, they had a printer that would print photographs, so it's all hooked up, tested the day before, but then Magenta ink would not print. So they ran out and purchased an emergency printer to bring in, and that particular printer had a problem with the connection to the camera to be able to transfer files. So what she did is she gave the URL out for those families to be able to download a free photo, a big resolution, and she mailed, and she just sent me a note today, she has mailed all the families a hard copy photo. She collected their address. So that was another pain point, and they're scrambling to try to get that resolved.
That may be an easier way to go about it in the future anyway.
I think so. I mean, it's always kind of fun and nice when you can give out that, but that's the risk of you're going to have to deal with mechanical issues or have an extra hot spare standing by.
Something else to do while you're trying to.
That's
There's
right.
a firewall out there that makes it was it a wireless printer?
No.
Okay.
It was wireless in that it would connect to her gear, but not on an outside network.
Okay, because I know that they have a problem with the VITA stuff and the firewalls out there.
Yes, for the network. Yeah, I saw the network gear, but we didn't connect to it in any way.
Would it be agreeable to suggest or recommend that we do this next year also?
Oh, yeah, we can, certainly.
What if we all agreed to that? time up as we need to.
That sounds reasonable to me. Is that reasonable to everybody else to go ahead and make the commitment that we would like to continue it and do it again next year, and maybe mid-year, early in the first quarter or early second quarter, we pick a date. And then advertising, I'm not sure. I know it was in the paper. It was on Facebook quite a few times. It was posted in stores, so I'm not sure.
I would suggest, I don't know exactly how you go about it, but I would suggest the schools.
I think maybe with the Girl Scout troops and those kinds of things, because I don't think we can get it into schools, but I think.
Yeah, that would be, yes.
I know from my kids, I don't know the facts, but I know they announce a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to be directly curricular.
But you have to really know people to get that in there.
We gotta know a few people.
But yeah, the Boy Scouts and Girl Scout troops, I think, would be.
Yeah.
And in fact, that could also become kind of an activity for them, just touring a historical kind of concept for
Get them
them.
volunteering if you did, stuff like that.
Oh, absolutely.
That would be easy with the Cub Scouts.
We can get in touch with the Girl Scout and Boy Scout leaders.
The two elementary school principals would.
So the minutes will reflect that we are going to go forward next year. Item 5.3, rules and bylaws for the Parks and Landscaping Board. We've talked about this in a couple of meetings. A few days ago, I sent out a compiled version taking source documents of the former tree board or tree commission and the former park board and tried to bring the responsibilities and the board membership components, who's in it, who assigns them, where do they come from, how many members, and that's what's in this document. One of the things that, even as I was just reading it here a minute ago, that needs to be added is our meeting date, our recurring scheduled meeting date, and I didn't see that in either of the source documents for these, but I have seen it in other documents, so that would reflect it's the regular first Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. The next step is this has already been, we're going to vote to go ahead and send this to the city unless we'll talk if there's any additional changes, and then it's going to go to the city manager, and he may at his discretion run it by the city attorney as well, because I'm not a lawyer, and we'd want them to make sure that it's wrapped properly and doesn't have anything missing. The only other comment I have beyond sending it along with that date, adding that meeting or standing meeting date and time, would be that, recognizing that there are some things in here that would probably be better suited to be found in the tree ordinance related to tree rules, rather, because in the past there was a kind of a tree ordinance, and it was a mash of things that included bylaw type material as well as tree rules and those pieces. Now that this is a combined board, it doesn't make as much sense to have that all in one place because it has nothing to do with parks, and it probably is just a cleaner way to handle it. But rather than us try to engage on that now, my interest is to get this approved, get it filed, and then we can come back and have an exercise to strip this out, because some of you may remember that have been on here for a while, we did a review of the tree ordinance that had all those amendments and revisions and revisions and revisions, and we compiled that, and that's already been sent over to the city as well. So if we can get an answer back on that, I am fairly certain that some of the stuff that's in here is covered in that document that's been sent out. So we just need an exercise to trim this down, but in a future. So open to discussion, thoughts or comments about this, and then ultimately we can follow it up with a vote to send it forward to the city.
It's 13-401, the second page. It says this will be referred to as the tree ordinance.
Yes, and that and that goes back to why there's so much tree stuff in here as part of that old ordinance. And I'll mark that out and remark it going forward, but I don't know what this would actually be called. I guess I would leave it to the city attorney or manager to put the proper, whether it's the Parks and Landscaping bylaws document or how they'd want to do it. But you're right, it needs to come out of there like that, certainly.
Okay, and then item 13-403. Both C and D talk about one member from the Friends of Bowie.
So,
That's what I.
so C is Friends of Bowie,
And D is,
and D is Fairview Historical Association.
nope,
Oh, D is Historical Association.
So there was Dr. Rice sent me a note, and I sent a new
Trick.
copy out.
Okay.
So a new copy of this got sent out
Okay, I did
this
not.
afternoon
It's a trick.
to everybody on the board. But if you didn't pop in your email, you wouldn't see that change.
Updated copy?
This is the latest one was, no, the one that was sent today is the updated copy.
okay, I didn't get.
But she just hasn't probably popped into her email to get it.
I didn't.
And I sent it to your personal email because
Okay.
you'd said you were having some issues on the city email. So that was brought to my attention, and absolutely that made sense, and it was corrected.
It's just.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it was just a cut and paste omission.
Okay. That's been corrected. And then on E, it says 7 members, but I only count 5. There's 2 for 2 years, 2 for 3 years, and 1 for 4 years.
Oh, yeah, when I was adding that up. So we've got our counts correct, going from A, which is 4,
Right.
and then 3 more, so there's our 7. So what needs to change is, and I guess that's a question on E. Is there a reason that it needs to have 2 for 2 years, 2 for 3 years, and 1 for 4, other than stagger terms? Can't we just stagger terms of 2 years? Or is there another reason why it would make sense that one person would be appointed for 4 versus we 3 of them will expire in
Well, this was the 7 members initially appointed, not continuing. So the successors are appointed for 4 years. F. I thought that said
So
vaccines.
E is probably already run its course, or not quite yet?
Yes. That's right. Because it's been appointed for years, yes.
Or is this is when the two came together as the initial?
I really don't think so. I think that everyone kind of served out their terms where they were, and so yeah.
It had not, originally, the tree ordinance did not have a staggered like this. This was brought up at a later time.
Was it? I thought when they established the tree board 25 years ago that it was. Was it not?
No, it came, I can't remember exactly when it came into play, but the 4 years was a little bit later.
But we've passed that. We've passed E.
And I wonder if we even need that paragraph in there, if it's even relevant anymore. Because we
Unless
came,
it's just historical.
the seats that existed on the tree commission already had dates associated with them, so those rolled forward. And the seats that were on the park, they also had their dates, and my understanding is they've just all rolled forward. And those dates are the same expirations, just according, so we could leave it for historical, but that's, yeah.
We'll let the city manager and the city attorney
Okay.
come out.
You said there were 7 members. 4 are to be appointed. One's from the park, one's from the Friends of the Park, one's from the Historic Association.
That would be a city commissioner.
There you go.
E.
Oh, I see what you're
This is
saying.
7
Yeah.
members, but they're only.
And my thought would be, let's remove it, but I'm going to make a note.
Well, I think that one of them, I think because if there's 5, then there was one, originally it was the mayor and the vice mayor who served. So that would
Yeah, it
make the
was
7.
quite a bit more complicated. Yeah.
Yes, so that was the other 2.
So I've got 13401, get rid of what we call the tree ordinance and get some guidance on what that should be called if it's the bylaws. Or I've got 13-403E, potentially leave it or remove it, whatever makes sense. Remove or update to reflect 7.
Are you gonna send me this?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
If you'll just send me the notes.
This plus the notes, the latest copy plus the notes.
Yes.
Anything else from anybody?
What was the question?
The question, part of the arborist. So part of the original ordinance included that an arborist would be available kind of as a consultant, the city arborist, but currently we don't have a city arborist serving, I think. So that question, I don't know if we had one, certainly we would include them, but whether we get one or when that will be, I don't know the answer to that.
Aren't we required to have an arborist to be our tree city?
That's what I was just
I don't
thinking.
think we are. I don't think we are required. I'll check. I'll double check that. In fact, well, we'll get to a Tree City update. Remind me to talk about that
Okay.
and that particular issue with the arborist, that question. No, I don't
I was thinking
think
that same
that's
thing.
required.
Yeah, I was thinking that we had to have an arborist. Either contract, on call,
Might
some
be,
shape, form, or fashion.
might be, but I'll need to double check.
I would leave all of that language alone.
Yes, in fact, the other language like that, I mentioned after this is in place, at some point next year, when we have those cycles, we can look at trimming some of this out and compare it to what's already covered in the tree ordinance and get this down to where it's truly just a structural bylaws document for the group versus having anything to do with the ordinances.
Tree ordinance, the original tree ordinance.
That there was a process back a long time ago. Mr. Hall would actually come in with city plans. I mean, plans that had been submitted that had gone to the planning commission or were about to go there to look at their landscape. And then there would be a vote, and then it would get sent up. Things have changed over the years. I believe the way that's addressed now is it gets handled as well as perhaps in front of the planning commission if those topics come up there, versus coming to us. And after some kind of round discussions about where the appropriateness of that would be, right? The permitting and enforcement, probably not this board. This board's probably the board that would say what do we recommend the rules would be? And then if those are agreed and approved, then the other bodies would actually, through their own processes, enforce it, whether it's on the planning commission or through city codes, whatever that component is in the city staff. But it used to be not that. It used to be, and then it created bottlenecks because people would come in for their plans, and if there was an issue in the tree meeting, there was one I think that didn't have a quorum. This is all before my time, so I'm speaking of memory and what my understanding of that is. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I fell into two things they're working on.
Wow, well, that's great. Yes, those have been some of the gaps we've talked about in the past, so that's excellent. Yes.
13 point. The original was only up to 1,000.
I like the 11,000.
So this is a cut and paste. However, this is a cut and paste from a source document, but that source document was a PDF that I actually had to send out for somebody to scan and type and correct. So that may be where that comes from now. That makes sense.
Let's go with 11,000.
I did bring it up.
And in fact, maybe in the notes I send to you, Debbie, I may just include something. Certainly I'll include about that 1,000. I'll update that before I
Okay.
send it to you.
That'll be good. Thank
But
you.
I think something else just for the city manager and or attorney to look at, it might be, let's go ahead and just gut some of the stuff in here that is tree ordinance related if it's covered somewhere else, and I think it is. And that way it just gets rid of the confusion, because we don't want to update several documents that all say the same thing, so.
Okie dokie. Just put that in the notes, please. Hey.
You're the, yep.
Really fast.
That's the second time I've been asked about that one, yes. And now it makes sense. Any other comments or thoughts? So with that, I think the action is to take a vote that we agree. I guess it would be a resolution, that we would make a resolution to pass this forward to the city manager.
I don't think it really matters what you call it, as long as we pass it up to the city attorney and the city manager.
Well, let's just take a vote that we agree that we will do that then. So is there are all in favor for that?
Yes.
All right. So it's not really a resolution and ordinance, I don't think. Just pass this forward. 5.4, Tree City update. So I will go, I'm in the process right now of renewing our application. I've already got stuff uploaded that I uploaded.
It concerns me when you point your pen at me like I somehow have something to
Well,
do with this.
no, because I'm pointing because you had a question on that topic. So we've got, the application is partially uploaded. I worked on it probably last time midsummer, maybe early spring, and then I was going to wait towards it got closer and we could get the budget numbers and all, make sure nothing's changed, and then resubmit. So I went in maybe 2 weeks ago to log in, and I could not log in. My user ID and password said the combination is incorrect. Originally, when I signed up, I used my personal email. This is a couple of years ago to get this thing rolling. And then about a year ago, I changed it to point it to the city manager's city address, which makes sense because the city manager will always be here, whoever that happens to be, but we will change. So when I went in to say, but I write all that down and it didn't like my password, but it does have this nice little thing, reset my password link. I'll send it to my email on file, which is the city manager, and I sent it, but it didn't show up in his email, so he's not seeing it either. But we've got a contact now with the Arbor Day Foundation, who's over the website, which is different than the people that are over the program. So I'm going to, city manager, last I got an email from him that he was going to reach out to them and try to correct that. And then if he's not able to find the right person or resolution, then I will engage on that either at the end of this week or early next week to get that reset. All we need to do is get it reset, and then I'll upload some fresh documents related to the event we had this past year, and then a review of the budget document requirements. And we should be able to good to go to submit. And we have until the end of the year to submit the open submission date. So it's a little easier process other than I can't log into the website currently. But while I'm in there, my finger point is I'm going to go and make sure and verify that that arborist is not a requirement. And I just don't think it is. I think there is language, but I think there's things you can do that aren't that also qualify. But I'll make a note to make sure. Because I don't know how that language would work if we were to have one on call or on contract. I know I don't remember that language, but I also know that many cities can't afford to have an arborist, so they have to blend it.
Volunteers.
Yeah.
And I think to be a tree city, I really think there was an arborist language in there. Of course, we'll argue about that later.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll go look it up. and we will figure that out.
And I know that you hope you're right.
Item 6 was new business. There was all the stuff we've talked about today is stuff that we've been rolling along with. Item number 7, citizens' comments. Any comments? We're good. So before we adjourn, I'll just announce that the next Fairview Parks and Landscaping Board meeting date is Tuesday, January 7th, 2019, 7 p.m. here at City Hall. And with that, I adjourn. Thank you for your notes.
For the interim city manager.